Welcome everyone to the Adversity to Advantage podcast. We're doing a special season all about mental health at work. And I'm very privileged to have almost forced, but no, he came willingly, to have Matthew Clements with us today to talk about mental health, but also his own experience. So he's the Senior Diversity and Inclusion Advisor at Herbert Smith Freehills law firm. And it's been great to know you for quite a while now, because we've done loads of work through my partnership with Medigold Health, supporting your mental health strategy, some of the training piece. So I kind of know some of this from the inside. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to join you. As you said, we've been working together really closely, and I feel like we know each other's jokes as well.
We do.
We're delivering sessions, which is nice.
We do. We kind of see them coming, give them a lead up. So for all of our guests, we've got just a couple kind of warm up questions. So I want to jump into those first. What do you think has been the best piece of advice that you've ever gotten about work or your career?
Yeah, it's a great question. I guess maybe kind of not so much advice, but kind of what I find has kind of helped guide me kind of through my career is to kind of do what you enjoy and kind of what you're passionate about and to not be scared about trying things and exploring that and finding out what that might be. And I think, when I kind of reflect on my career and my education as well, I spent kind of 7 years of education with the aim of kind of practicing law. And it was really only in my third year of law school that I kind of realized there were other opportunities out there that I probably hadn't thought about. And so I moved into studied a master's in HR, which was truly terrifying. The first couple of months of that, it was just very different from what I'd been used to. And then I started, a career in learning and development, then realized that my kind of passion was in DNI, and then moved to kind of a role in London as well, where I was doing that full time. So I guess those are all like kind of mini leaps of faith,
Very much
kind
so.
of, kind of along the way. And each time I think I have kind of stepped out of that comfort zone a little bit, but I've grown as well. So I guess that's kind of the guide that has helped me throughout my career so far, as well as kind of having some really inspiring leaders and role models along the way as well.
I love that. So experiment with things that work for you. And just because you're on a trajectory, because many people would be like, I've invested 6-7 years. What the hell are you doing going a different direction? But just something in your heart maybe just kind of felt that wasn't the right fit for you.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I got caught up as well, just in, kind of aiming for something and kind of all of my kind of energy went into that, in terms of kind of studying and trying to kind of forge a career and get experience. And, it was really unsettling when I realized actually I could do something different. And it's not something that they tell you in law school. You go through law school with the aim of practicing, and no one tells you about all of these other careers that the skills that you develop can be so helpful. So it was I don't regret it. I kind of definitely made the right move, and I think I have a much more exciting and kind of rewarding career as a result of it.
After all those steps. So second question, was there anything that you needed to unlearn to make yourself better at work?
Yeah, I guess kind of probably the main thing was that, I don't have all of the answers, and I don't need to have all of the answers either. And that was really helpful. And I think particularly, the value that kind of I bring in DNI is about listening to people, and letting them come up with the answers, and helping to create those spaces where people can feel really seen and heard, and sometimes, for the first time as well in work. And that doesn't rely on me having kind of a cheat book or kind of all of the answers to those questions. So
it's okay to learn as you go and not feel, because what's the impact of trying to think you have to have all the answers all the time?
Yeah, well, I think it's just that kind of pressure, isn't it, of and that expectation. And you kind of mentioned there around, kind of learn as you go, and I think that's part of it, but I think part of it is that, there are things that, I just won't know. And that's where we kind of need to, engage with other people and listen to them. And, it's not for me to have all of the solutions, to all of the challenges we face, but to help, the business and our people navigate those. I think that's the kind of the real skill with it.
Yeah, which is a beautiful segue into the topic around mental health at work. So I know that
Yeah.
you guys at Herbert Smith Freehills globally have done a whole bunch, but it really did start in London with the two offices, the work that you did, which ended up sort of growing into a much bigger thing. So first of all, what do you see as some of the challenges when it comes to mental health at work in a law firm in a global pandemic? What do you see?
Yeah, I think, in a way, the pandemic has just exacerbated some of those challenges that already exist, which are around, really intense working environment, long hours, kind of that perfectionism, and kind of the client demands as well. I think those, interestingly, that, those are what I think draws people to that profession as well. And they can feel really empowering, but also, if you don't have that kind of proactiveness around resourcing yourself and the resilience and building that and de-stressing, then I do think those can become really quickly overwhelming for people as well.
Yeah.
Um, in terms of what we've been doing, in HSF, that has been happening for many more years than kind of I've been there. I think probably 8+ years. It's kind of been on the agenda of the firm, and a real priority as well. I guess kind of last year in October, we launched Thrive, which is our first global mental health strategy, which was really exciting, and that, kind of drew together all of the work that we had already done, but kind of under really a central vision as well, and something that we could talk to our clients about, and we could talk to kind of other law firms and our own people about as well, and kind of giving us that common language around what are we trying to do and why is this important. And that's been hugely helpful. And I think really interestingly as well, that that's a strategy that connects with everything that we do in diversity and inclusion as well, more broadly, and our business strategy. And I think for some people that's quite an interesting connection, and maybe not a kind of a common area of focus for kind of a strategic focus for diversity and inclusion teams as well. But I do think there's a really strong connection around well-being and inclusion, and those, all of those outcomes as well.
And I'm curious, before we go into some of the other stuff that you've done, what I love about the Thrive strategy is kind of its simplicity, because I've seen so many, especially global businesses, get tasked with doing a strategy. First of all, there might be the pushback or the, needing to get the business, argue it from the top level about why we need it. But then it becomes like, oh my God, how many, like, well-being can cover everything. If it's global, we've got all these cultural differences. Like, how the hell do we pull it together? What was your thinking just behind, the simplicity or tackling it on a global scale as you have?
Yeah, I think we went into it thinking that we needed to create something that was simple and straightforward, and that people could really easily understand and kind of get on board with as well. So I guess it exists in two forms. It exists one in probably a 6-page document that we prepared for kind of the business and the leadership to kind of look through and sign off. And then the second one is a kind of just a 1-page infographic on it.
I
And
love it so much.
yeah, and really that's what we share. We don't share the slightly broader 6-page document, which is probably pretty short.
Even then,
kind of,
for global, the amount of countries you guys cover, 6-page, but I love that it covers things like prevention, culture, language, as well as crisis. So many people still are thinking mental health equals how do we deal with crisis, but you guys really, in a simple, straightforward way, tackle it from all ends.
Yeah, so going in, we absolutely set it up for, that it would be relevant and it would apply to everybody in the firm. and that was really important. And it would be proactive in the majority of its kind of action as well. And also that it would sit within kind of our people and culture side, and be really intimately connected with that as well. I think what you've seen probably over those kind of 8-10 years is an evolution of how businesses now interact and understand mental health. One from starting as a risk which needs to kind of be managed, to now about enabling people, enabling performance, and an inclusive culture as well. And I think there are still organizations out there that feel more in the risk space, but for us, we wanted to be really clear about that evolution that had happened, and where we saw ourselves being at the minute, and all of the work that we still need to do as well going forward.
Sure. And I remember when I first sort of met you and we started doing some work together, that there had, what was it called? This Is Me. So where your senior leaders were doing videos. To just tell us about that. And then I'd love to go into like what happened next after the strategy.
Yeah, so I think that was probably one of our kind of earliest things that we did around mental health was just leaders, and actually not just leaders, but people from all across the business of all levels and in all departments, sharing their stories and then being really open. And I think those really helped to set that kind of culture and the tone, and kind of the way that we approached mental health as well. So yeah, they've been hugely valuable, and they've had lots of different iterations throughout the years. Australia did a slightly different version for Are You OK Day, and then recently we did kind of a new one called My Story, which was experiences through lockdown, as well, which was really amazing, and we got to see such a kind of a human side of people as well.
So, and I love that you've got your globalized strategy, but there are what we call localized action planning. So it fits with where they're at, or the pace with where they want to start. So you launched the Thrive strategy. What were your next steps as far as rolling out your programs?
So I think for us, probably the priority for this year, or year one of the strategy, was really redeveloping and then launching our Global Mental Health Champions program, which we were really intimately involved with.
Yes.
It's amazing.
Such passionate people who really just wanted to be part of something positive and like uplifting while helping people who might be struggling. So it was such a privilege to meet so many people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember kind of the first session that we had, and prior to that, it had just been, kind of me and a few other people working on, what that kind of program looks like, at least kind of in its draft form. And it was so nice to kind of see them people interact with it and change it. And I think that's what was really important with the program, was that it was co-created by those people. So we had some individuals who were involved in a kind of a legacy program in London, and we got them really engaged in the change, as well as people who hadn't been involved in anything around mental health ever, and kind of brought a really fresh insight to it as well. So I think, that was an amazing program. We now have over 500 champions across the world.
All levels of the business, it's worth saying as well. So not just maybe more junior people, but there's like partners, there's just like the whole level of people who are passionate, which I think may help to make a difference.
Yeah, I think you need that, and bringing people from different offices and different departments, and really, leaning into those different perspectives that people have as well. That was hugely important. And I think, one of the things that really was kind of helpful for me, and has been kind of helpful going forward, is to constantly think about how that program needs to evolve and develop, and to check in with the people who are involved in it, and be really open to feedback as well. I think we've seen how quickly the world changes, and how unpredictable that is. And so we set up our program in what you've often termed kind of peacetime. And so very different environment that we're working in today, and how does that program stay relevant, and how does it continue to deliver, and create an impact? I think it's important that we're constantly checking in on that.
So just talk us through some of the ways that we've worked closely on this, haven't we, with different departments, and adapting to remote, but also to what people need now. Like, we've done more reactive, responsive support. What's changed?
Yeah, I think the challenges around connection, and so much of what we do in mental health, but also just broader D&I, is about really authentic, genuine connection with people. And it does sometimes strike me strange that we have to create these kind of structures and ways for people to kind of come together. And
such a weird
and
world.
it is. It's very strange. So I wish there was a way that we could all do that so much better, and with maybe without so much effort. But I think, yeah, it is really important that that connection piece maintains. And I think what's been interesting is through COVID, we've seen some of that shift. So people are connecting in a very different way, and we're having an insight into people's lives. We're meeting their partners, we're meeting their pets, we're
Their children, yeah.
yeah, we're silently judging their taste
Decor.
and decor. Yeah, absolutely, like my white walls. And I think that that has helped people connect in a very different way and in a more human way, but also at the same time, but feel more, we've all felt more disconnected from each other as well. So yeah, it's a really interesting. Um,
It is, and there are long-term impacts. And so we've been doing a host of shorter, more responsive webinars around not just well-being, but the buildup of stress, connection, trying to be as practical as possible. So I think there's more we can say around the future as we see it. So let's come back to that. But before we do, Matt, I'd love to know just a bit more of your personal connection to this topic. So, like, why is it fulfilling for you? What is the connection to mental health and even diversity and inclusion that drives you? Tell us a bit of your story.
yeah, I think that's a really great question. And I think, outside of the fact that we all have mental health, and, this is an important topic for everyone, I think my kind of connection to it on a really personal level comes from what I described earlier, that connection between inclusion, well-being, and kind of bringing your whole self to kind of work and life, and being authentic. And I think for me, then, that was my experience around coming out, probably now 7 years ago, at least, kind of initially. Yeah, it's absolutely true that you never kind of stop coming out, and there's always new people and new situations, and whether that's changing jobs or meeting new people socially, as well. And I think kind of a realization as well that the LGBT plus community, you know also experience higher levels of mental ill health than some other communities, other groups of people. And definitely more work that we need to do, to support that as well. So I think, yeah, that's kind of my connection to it. And although when I kind of come out to my mum and my brothers and their family, I had kind of completely unconditional support and love, and I realized that that's sadly not the case for everyone. But it was still really difficult, and I think it was.
I mean, talk us through that process, like just the buildup. Were you just terrified? Like, what were you afraid of? How did you do it? Like, what was that lead up? And were you just like, I can't live like this anymore? Like, did you know a long time ago?
Yeah, no, I did. And I think, I often think that, the work that I do and the work that others do around making kind of societies and our workplaces more inclusive, I think you still have that personal journey first, even though the environment can be fully accepting. I think it makes it easier, but there's still a realization that actually I'm different from the majority of people. And I think that comes with a challenge, and kind of a challenge around mental health as well, particularly if you're kind of doing that on your own. So I think, yeah, that realization of difference, that fear also of kind of non-acceptance, is very real. I
Mm,
would wake up and I would read in the news or watch TV, and it would be people debating about whether I should have the same rights as my brothers.
yeah,
And that has an impact, and that just gets absorbed,
yeah.
as well. And then I think, yeah, my kind of experience leading up to kind of coming out, for me, um I felt that as kind of or that showed up for me as kind of this mounting pressure, kind of a
Mm.
build up, both kind of physically and emotionally, that I just couldn't kind of contain. And I think then, once you do come out, once you do start to talk to people, then it's that realization that, okay, this is now a conversation that I can't get away from, and people want to talk to me about it. And so that's challenging in itself.
Right.
You can't hide anymore, and you can't choose not to have that kind of conversation, I guess. So yeah, I guess
So having the first talk is only the first step, is what you're saying, and then it's like your whole life is goes on a different trajectory in a way.
yeah, I think so, and I think that kind of almost kind of sudden loss of control, at least initially, is,
Control of,
I think, control of kind of the message, how people see you,
got it,
that people
behavior
know.
towards you. Yeah.
Yeah, and just suddenly that this is something that other people know, and I have to confront. Um, yeah, I think initially that can be really
Mm.
scary. I guess what I would say is that it absolutely kind of gets better, and that's not to say that there are not days when I don't feel different, or kind of my difference is kind of really brought into sharp focus. But I think you get better at navigating those situations as well, and I wouldn't change who I am, and I think it's brought me, kind of additional insights. It's brought me a kind of an amazing drive in what I do, and kind of greater empathy and connection with other people. And I honestly don't think I would probably be in the career that I am, in DNI without it as well. So yeah, it's given me some fantastic opportunities.
Absolutely. And you can see that in the passion that you work with. I'm curious about, you said to me earlier, I didn't tell my mother face to face,
Yeah.
and that was your first person. Instead, you wrote a letter. So I'd love to know, what was that letter like, the reaction? But equally, how did you feel about that being the way that you
Mhm.
came out?
Yeah, and yeah, interestingly, that was probably within weeks of me kind of graduating from law school, and on top of that kind of build up of pressure, one of the other kind of driving factors behind it was, I didn't want to graduate without people knowing kind of who I was, and kind of
Mm,
without being
mm,
authentic. And for me, I felt that if I did, and people didn't know, that would somehow invalidate, my
wow.
achievement. And I look back on that now and think that's, clearly not, that would never be the case, but that's what it felt like. And that was kind of, I guess, the part of the driver for it as well. But yeah, as you said, I kind of, yeah, I spoke to my mum first. Well, I didn't speak to her. I wrote her a letter, and then kind of panicked and was absolutely terrified. And I'm sure she absolutely panicked as well when she read it. But it was, it was hugely positive, and I've always had kind of that unconditional support and love from her, and that never changed. I guess, kind of even 7 years later, I look back on that moment, and I kind of feel guilty about it, and I feel guilty that I didn't have the courage to talk to her face to face, at least initially. That I couldn't find the words to do that other than kind of writing a letter. Um, and yeah, that's been kind of difficult, I think, at times.
Were you hard on
And
yourself for that?
yeah, yeah, and I think it was only actually kind of a few weeks ago that changed, and the reason why it changed was I was scrolling through my Twitter feed, and I came across a post from this other guy who had um, taken a photograph of the letter that he had written his mum 10 years ago, to kind of come out. And I just saw myself reflected in that. And I think that was probably the first time that I thought I kind of paused and I reflected, and I think I was able to look back then on a kind of a much younger and really terrified, self, but with kindness, and to say, actually, you were courageous and you were authentic, and you have absolutely nothing to feel ashamed about. So that's been really interesting, I think, and only a kind of a realization that I've had in the past few weeks.
But it's so amazing what we can learn from that, which is when other people share their process of something difficult or their mental health challenges or coming out, whatever it might be, the ripple effect on other people, like it's had this profound impact. And you just saw his letter, right? So talking about our stories and just saying, this was hard for me, there's this ripple effect that we may not know anything about, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And how powerful was his letter for me that day that I saw it, and in a way that I guess that's kind of healed a little part of me that for a number of years I felt bad about, and probably shouldn't have. So huge impact that you can create by being authentic and sharing part of who you are.
Yeah, it gives permission for other people, and we realize we're not alone, or we're not the crazy ones, or the ones who lack courage. And it also reminds me that many people who are struggling with their mental health, a therapist or a friend might not be the first place they go, because they don't know what's wrong with them, in quotations. And so it's terrifying to go, hey, I don't know what's going on. I'm scared. I'm experiencing these symptoms. I don't know what they are. And often, in many of the podcasts we've had, the first step has been going on to an online forum, putting out an anonymous something, sort of post around what they're feeling. And then the engagement of people going, me too, I feel that too. This bit was hard for me too. I judged myself internally too, right? So it's just interesting that sometimes that's the first step before, just to get us brave enough to talk to people, or to come out every day, as you often have to.
Yeah, and I think, we all share our stories and we all share parts of ourselves in very different ways. And there's no kind of right or wrong way to do that. And there's no right or wrong time to do that. And, some days it's, you might feel braver, and other days, you don't want to share that. And that's part of you, and you feel vulnerable, and that's absolutely fine. But I think there's definitely something about being much more open, and creating those opportunities for people to share and to connect in a very human way.
I love that. And so I want to just connect this into the diversity inclusion role that you have.
Mm.
What's one or two things that you wish people knew about diversity and inclusion within the workplace? Like, do you get stupid questions sometimes of just people like, why do we have this department? Or surely we're all, inclusive anyway. Like, what do you think? What do you wish people knew so that they could, I guess, help build momentum with inclusivity?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I guess maybe two things. One is that inclusion is for everybody, and yes, there are groups that have historically been excluded, or find it more challenging, or do not feel that they fit in the same way within many of the cultures that we've created over tens and hundreds of years in business. But it's absolutely about everyone feeling that they have a place where they can belong, and a culture in which they can be themselves as well. So I think that's one that's really important. And I think sometimes people think that it's about select groups of people, and I don't think that's true. And I think secondly that this is work, and something that's important for everyone to do. And it can't be the sole responsibility of a small team within the business to shift the culture. That takes a huge amount of time and effort, and it takes really the commitment of everybody, and for everyone to see that that's a priority, as well. So I guess those are the two things that I wish
I love those.
people would know more. Yeah.
I love those too. And so finally, I'd love to just do a little bit of future gazing. Do you feel like the world is forever changed with this remote working and this pandemic stuff? Like, is it the new normal now forever? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've kind of settled into this being the new normal, and that's brought, I guess, some comfort for me as well to just get back into some of my kind of routines again. I do think there's been a shift in attitudes around mental health more recently, and I think that has been both positive and negative. I think that the downside of that is we're seeing that more people are experiencing mental ill health,
Mm-hmm.
and that their kind of normal coping mechanisms and their support structures are either hugely reduced or actually no longer accessible to them. And I think there's a real challenge around that. I think if we were to look for the silver lining within that, which sometimes is a really not a great phrase, but the silver lining is that I think leaders and individuals who perhaps haven't been engaged in this sort of space before have kind of woken up, and they've been either personally impacted by it, or they've seen how it has kind of played out within their teams as well. And I think that's led to kind of greater understanding, greater awareness, that this is a priority both for individuals but also for teams and as a business. And then kind of greater engagement as well. And I really hope that maintains when we're kind of on the other side of this, and whatever that kind of world looks like.
Love it. And so what are the plans for DNI mental health within HSF? Like, can you do some visioning around what you guys are putting in place? Or are you trying to let the dust settle?
I guess, yeah, it's kind of being confident in the strategy that we set up, and we have looked back on it in with a COVID lens, and actually everything remains as relevant as
Yeah.
it was 12 months ago. I think probably the one thing that is different is connection, and I think we maybe didn't put that as kind of strongly across in the strategy, and I think that has come into kind of really sharp focus. And I think we've talked about how we've witnessed that connection really change for people, connecting more deeply, but also on the flip side feeling more disconnected from teams. So I think that has to be a priority for us in the next 6-12 months, is how those teams connect and how individuals feel supported. Yeah, so I think probably one of the other things is then just continuing to collect that kind of feedback and be open to insights. Listen to our people. What are they kind of experiencing? What are they telling us is important? I think this is a time where we need to be really led by them, and really engage with them as well. I think kind of post COVID, I think you'll see that future talent is going to be expecting so much more from businesses and their leaders in this space, and I think businesses who aren't doing anything, or maybe not doing very much, are going to have to really radically shift their perspectives, and start to do some more longer term planning around this as well. Um, I think for us, as people start to kind of transition back into office working, it's agile and remote working, I think, is absolutely here to stay. And we, as a firm, we've recently launched our kind of an updated agile working policy. So when people are back in the office, they will be expected, or I guess kind of the average is that people will work 60% of their time in the office. And I think that has really amazing positives around facilitating kind of going to the gym and other kind of commitments, and well-being, and inclusion more generally. I think it's challenging if we think about how do we build and maintain those inclusive teams in a remote environment where some people may be not in the office and others will be. And I think how do we communicate in those sorts of situations, and do we need to get better at that, and do we need to have, you know, more discussions around how people like to work, and where they like to work and when they like to work, and how we respect those. We're mindful of people's different working styles as well.
Yeah, and I guess that it's more about outcomes and results rather than exactly, you know, looking over people's shoulder about the types of hours or ways that they're working. So many good insights and ideas for companies. I love it. Just to close, what is your one or two like non-negotiables, things that you do to look after your own mental health?
Yeah. So I guess probably a year ago or a little bit more ago, I started yoga, which has been kind of, yeah, transformational in my life. I need to do more of it, but yeah, I remember going to my first kind of couple of classes, and that was the first time that I could really switch off from everything else that was going on. And you know, I, at that point had moved to London probably about 8 months prior, and you know, this is a really challenging city to kind of live and work in, and to find space where you're on your own with your thoughts.
Yeah, very,
so
almost impossible.
yeah, so that has been really important. And then I kind of, yeah, started cycling over lockdown, which has been really helpful. Helped me to kind of feel like my world was slightly bigger than just my apartment. So yeah, those have become really quickly. Those my kind of two non-negotiables of kind of getting exercise, and getting some time for myself as well.
I love it. Matt, thank you so much for coming onto the show and giving us both your personal and workplace insights. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.